So after the first two parts, we've seen positions where the defender's king is one square within the bishop's triangle, and positions where the defender's king is two squares within the bishop's triangle. Now for part 3, we'll look at positions where the defender's king is the deepest inside the triangle that it could possibly be. It's like that joke, how far can a dog run into the woods? Halfway, because once it's past halfway, it's running out of the woods. An interesting detail regarding the evaluations of the BBFs is that they're all different from their counterparts, so this kind of shows how unique the two pieces are. So I explained in the video on Rook and Knight versus Rook that the conditions of the second BBF are optimal when playing for a win with the Knight, but in Rook and Bishop versus Rook, the conditions of the second BBF are optimal for the defender to draw. So unlike the Knight, the Bishop is actually stronger when the defender's king is in a more central location along the edge compared to when the defender's king is closer to the corner. The attacker has dual ideas of checkmate, so it paves the way for some very useful tempo on the road to forcing a win. So the 3rd through 6th BBFs are all easy wins in Rook and Bishop versus Rook, and since there's the dual checkmating ideas, the 4th and 5th BBFs are pretty much the same thing, and the 3rd and 6th BBFs are pretty much the same thing. So to make it less confusing, I'll just always refer to a 5th BBF as a 4th BBF, and always refer to a 6th BBF as a 3rd BBF. So the 3rd and 4th BBFs are both easy wins, so I'm going to go over those in this video. They have a lot of resemblance to the second BBF of Rook and Knight versus Rook, because the goal is to get the defender's rook onto its most inferior rank. So before we look at the winning methods for the 3rd and 4th BBFs of Rook and Bishop versus Rook, let's just compare the rook's available ranks. Alright, this is black to move and win. White's king is 3 squares within the bishop's triangle. Even though the bishop's not currently in its normal location, it can still quickly reinforce the triangle, so we still kind of treat it that way. The bishop controls the d8 square, preventing the rook from checking, so positions like this usually have the makings for some decisive tactics, while the rook's path to check is currently restricted by the attacker's pieces. Black can use this time to achieve other things. But if the minor piece is a camel, then it easily controls these squares, but even though the bishop is a more powerful piece than the camel, it still can't easily control those squares while simultaneously blocking its king. So a bishop can't control these squares while also obstructing check, so the bishop can only control these squares if it's restricted instead of obstructing. The bishop can't really control c1 very easily without giving up control of d8, but the bishop can control e1 without giving up control of d8, so the bishop can do that from a5. So first, black would want to get the rook onto this side, and if white tries to escape with king to c1, then black simply reinforces this triangle. So now it's like what we've seen before, where black just has a simple checkmate with the king 1 square inside the bishop's triangle. So white can only defend mate along the file, and now the defender's pieces still control where the rook can check, but now the bishop is able to attack where the rook can defend mate, and it also maintains control of d8. So the only thing that white can do here is try to escape, and now the bishop's triangle can be reinforced, and black can also win with rook to b5 with the kind of tactics where the bishop checks and Alright, we saw that the 8th rank can... Okay, we saw that when the rook is on the 8th rank, that the bishop can control where it can check. So we see the rook's going to run into the same kind of problems on the 6th rank. But not only that, but the bishop also controls where the rook could be able to employ a Zen defense in some variations. And not only that, but the bishop's paths to control d6 also obstruct the rook's line of defense. So the 6th rank is far more inferior than the 8th rank. And the way that black exploits this is by going for a tactic that... Imagine that black is able to play both of these moves simultaneously without allowing white to do anything in the process. So if black is able to achieve this position, then this bishop is restricting where the rook can check, and the bishop is also obstructing where the rook can block mate, so there won't be any way for white to defend checkmate in this position. But the problem is that black can't play both of these simultaneously. Black is going to have to figure out how to get in both of these moves without allowing white to do anything in the process. So the way that black does that is by first dislodging this white king so that white won't have time to relocate the rook. White will have to move the king back. So first black checks, rook to d2 check, and now king to c1 is forced, because if king to e1, then black can exploit the fact that white doesn't have a 4th Zen defense here because the bishop controls f6. If the rook was on c7 or c8, then the position would be a draw by the 4th Zen defense. So this is a way that black can exploit the fact that white's rook is on its inferior defensive post with tactics like that. So king to c1 is forced. If black were to try to threaten checkmate on the symmetrically equivalent side as of the last variation, then white could simply step back. And now when the rook threatens checkmate, to b2 check, and then obviously there's the discovered check winning the rook if king a1. So king goes back to c1, and now this position is a lot like the starting position, except that white's king is on c1 instead of d1, and now this is like a loss of a tempo for white, because now black has ideas like bishop e3 check. With white's king dislodged here, black can go ahead with this plan of trying to obstruct the rook, because white doesn't have time to relocate. So after rook b5, white has to play king to d1. If white tries pinning the bishop, stopping the bishop check, then instead of pinning the bishop, king to d1 holds on a little longer. And this is like the starting position, except that black has the rook on b5 for free, and white's rook is still on its bad defensive post. So now this is like the starting position, as if black had played rook to b5 and bishop to c5 simultaneously. Black just needed to gain some tempo there in order to achieve this. So now there's nothing that white can do here. This rook can't check here, and its path to block check up here is shut off. So there's no escape for white here. It's like the Philidor position. The defender's rook wants to employ a second rank defense, so even if black tries to cover the square, like if he tries to win with something like this, covering the E1 square, white can still draw with a second rank defense. So the task of the attacker's rook is to cover the second rank and prevent a second rank defense. That's the main task of the attacker's rook. So it's not like rook and knight versus rook where the knight does that for you. So remember, the 6th rank is the most inferior. Black is going to be able to win easily if the rook is forced to the 6th rank, but since the rook only needs 2 files to alternate on, it can simply alternate between the 7th and 8th ranks while avoiding the inferior 6th rank. So black is going to need to figure out how to force the rook to the 6th rank, and black is going to use the bishop to do that, because remember, the 8th rank is kind of semi-inferior because the d8 square can be restricted by the bishop with ideas like this, and it's also, the bishop cuts into where the rook would be able to go to the 7th rank. So that's kind of the idea, is to get in a tactic like that. So since the rook needs 2 squares to alternate on, we know for a fact that the rook is going to end up on the 8th rank at some point if it's going to avoid going to the 6th rank, and when the rook's on the 8th rank, we can go for tactics like this. So first simply waste a move, and now the rook doesn't want to go to the inferior 6th rank, so black wins with rook to d2 check, so rook to e8, and now this move kind of looks appealing because it would prevent the rook from coming to the 7th rank, and it would prevent the rook from checking on the 8th rank, so it looks like it would force the rook to the 6th rank, but the problem is that it's giving up control of the critical f2 square. So if black tries this, then white has this good move, king to e1, and now this is no longer checkmate. So and then if black tries to reinforce this, then white draws with a Zen defense. So before black goes for this idea, black's rook should cover that square so that this so that the we can get the kind of positions we get with the king 2 squares within the bishop's triangle. But black should do it with tempo so that white doesn't have time to do anything else. So here this gains a tempo, forcing the rook to reinforce the defense, because if king to c1, then we get these kind of positions like we got with the king 2 squares within the bishop's triangle, where all white can really do here is pin, and we know it's an easy win. So after rook b2, rook to c8 is forced, and now black can go for this restrictive maneuver that restricts the rook from returning to the 7th rank and checking on the 8th rank. So the bishop is restricting the rook from 3 ranks at a time, so it forces white's rook to the 6th rank, and white's only other option would be to attack the rook like this, but this allows black to go for the kind of tactics we saw before, where the bishop can aim for control. So here, white's only move is rook to c6, and now with the rook on the 6th rank, black can go for the tactics we saw before, where he starts with rook to d2 check, but if the bishop simply returns to its post, then white is going to return his rook to a better defense, so black needs to gain a tempo, threatening checkmate first, forcing the rook to check, and now the bishop returns to its normal post, without allowing white to do anything in the process, because white has to return. And now we already know how to win this position. Alright, this is really a 6th BBF, but I'm calling it a 3rd BBF because it's pretty much the same thing. This just takes a move longer than the normal 3rd BBF because black's rook has to spend a move swinging over to the long side of the formation. So white's rook is on the semi-superior 7th rank, and the rook controls where it would be able to get to the superior 2nd rank. And now black wastes a move getting the rook to one of the inferior ranks, so rook to d8. The logic behind the inferior and superior ranks is the same as in the 4th BBF, but the sub-variations in the winning method are a little bit different. So this part is the same. The rook gains a tempo here, forcing rook to b8. Now this is the same as in the 4th BBF, where the bishop makes this maneuver that restricts the rook from checking on the 8th rank and also restricts it from returning to the 7th rank and maintains its restriction of the 5th rank. But the sub-variation is a little bit different. Instead of moving the rook down, that idea is not going to work because the bishop doesn't have enough room to where it could control the d1 square. So in this position, black can simply exploit the defender's proximity to the corner. So this kind of has more resemblance to the 2nd BBF of rook and knight versus rook, because there's the same kind of tactics where the minor piece wants to check with tempo, but in this position the rook can guard here, so black is going to go for a symmetrically equivalent tactic, and the bishop is a diagonal piece unlike the knight, so the bishop has symmetrically equivalent ideas of going for the same kind of tactic, unlike in rook and knight versus rook. So white's only move here would be rook to b2, preparing to defend here while also prepared to defend against rook h1 check, but since this is the only square that maintains control of both defensive moves, then black simply wastes a move, and now black is still threatening these mating ideas with the idea of checking with the bishop, and now white is in zugzwang. So king to b1 is going to be losing quickly. White has to move the rook to the inferior 6th rank, just like in the 4th BBF. And it's the same here, where black makes this tempo move so that white's rook doesn't have time to go anywhere. It has to stay on the 6th rank, and now black's formation is normalized, but white's rook is on the inferior 6th rank, and now black's winning method here is one move shorter. Instead of checking here and then going to a5 to prepare to play bishop b5 block, black can win a move faster by simply exploiting the king's proximity to the corner. So simply threaten rook check and then bishop check with tempo. So this move is not going to do anything, runs to mate in 1, so there's really nothing that white can do here. It's going to be forced mate no matter what. So this video was on the simple BBFs where the attacker has an easy win with the dual ideas of checkmate. The next video is going to cover the complex BBFs where the attacker doesn't have the dual ideas of checkmate.